Have you ever found yourself arguing with someone who passionately defends a dictator or a war, even though they gain nothing from it? They might be smart, educated, even reasonable, until politics comes up. Then something shifts. It's like their personality disappears, replaced by a script. They speak in slogans. Their arguments feel prepackaged. Their answers don't match your questions, and their words sound like they were copy-pasted from a state propaganda broadcast. It's unsettling, like watching a mask snap into place. So why does this happen? What flips that psychological switch? What makes ordinary people, your neighbor, your coworker, even someone in your family, suddenly defend war, censorship, and brutality as if their lives depend on it? My name is Elvira Bary. I'm a writer born in the Soviet Union. In this video, I want to show you exactly how the human mind can be hijacked by authoritarianism and why none of us is entirely safe from it. If you don't want to live under a dictatorship, if you want your children and grandchildren to grow up with freedom of speech, movement, and belief, then we need to understand the people who support strongmen, the ones who vote for authoritarian leaders, the ones who cheer on war, because they are not going anywhere. They won't disappear, and they won't change their minds just because someone mocks them online. These are real people with real fears and unmet needs, needs that in some twisted way authoritarian regimes claim to satisfy. They don't love dictators because they are cruel. They love them because they are looking for safety, certainty, and belonging. And if we can understand how that psychological mechanism works, we might be able to change the script. To describe the typical supporter of Putin's regime and the war in Ukraine, we'll use the Russian slang term Vatnik. Originally, a Vatnik is a cheap quilted cotton padded jacket, basic winter wear for the working class. But in political slang, it has come to symbolize something much more: blind, aggressive loyalty to authoritarian power. A Vatnik is not necessarily uneducated or poor. They can be professors, bureaucrats, factory workers in Serbia, teachers in Yakutia, or Uber driver in Los Angeles. And they don't even have to be Russian citizens. Vatnikism is not about citizenship or geography. It's about mindset. Over years of interviews, I've identified 5 psychological markers that help you recognize a Vatnik. The first is emotional intensity. A Vatnik can be calm, balanced, and likable until politics comes up. The moment they sense disagreement, something changes. They become visibly agitated. Their voice rises. They start interrupting, sometimes even shouting. This happens even when the topic is distant and abstract, like foreign countries or leaders they've never met. I've seen a calm French literature professor lose his mind at the mention of criticism toward Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Why? What's it to him? Ask a Vatnik why they're reacting this way, and you'll likely get silence or confusion. They don't know. They might come up with an answer later, but in the moment, they are just reacting from instinct. The second marker is their use of ritualistic insults to anyone they disagree with. It's not enough to say President Zelensky. It must be Nazi Zelensky or Junkie Zelensky. And they'll often toss in that he's a puppet of the West, George Soros, Ukrainian oligarchs, or some vague conspiracy. The same goes for any political opponent. You'll see it in my comment section. Either I am inherently worthless, or I am being paid by the CIA, M16, or some secret Jewish cabal. Just to clarify, I'm supported by you, my viewers. If you find value in my work, you can support me by subscribing, liking, and sharing my videos, and by clicking the join button or buying me a coffee through the link below. These knee-jerk insults serve a purpose: dehumanization. Their real audience isn't you or me, it's themselves. It's not about defeating me, it's about silencing the part of themselves that might start to doubt. Because if I am just a drugged up CIA puppet, they don't have to take anything I say seriously. No reflection, no discomfort, no risk of doubt. It's psychological self-defense, like an immune system rejecting foreign ideas before they even reach the mind. The third marker is a deep belief in a world ruled by absolute evil. In the Vatnik's view, that evil is always the West. The West is omnipotent, omnipresent, and eternally plotting Russia's or other countries' destruction. It has unlimited resources, endless spies, secret armies, and long-term strategies. It orchestrates revolutions, funds terrorists, and explodes pipelines, all just to harm Russia. This belief mirrors medieval theology. It's the same structure as Satan and his demons, tempting and attacking from every corner. In that context, conspiracy theories thrive, because if you can expose the conspiracy, you regain a sense of control. The fourth marker is a bitter disillusionment with people and morality. Vatniks tend to believe that everyone acts purely out of self-interest. Morality is fake. Anyone who thinks otherwise is either stupid or crazy. And if morality is fake, then moral rules don't apply to them either, especially not when fighting the devil. This leads to a classic defense mechanism: whataboutism. You present a logical, undeniable argument. Let's say Russia invaded Ukraine to protect Russian speakers in Donbass. Fine. But now the region is destroyed. Industry is gone. Youth are dead or fleeting. The land is littered with mines. Economically and demographically, the area is ruined for decades. Meanwhile, hundreds of thousands of Russian soldiers have died or been wounded. Sanctions have crushed trade, and trillions of rubles were spent on destruction instead of schools and hospitals. Was it worth it? Vatniks won't answer your questions. They will start reciting a creed, like a prayer. What about the US fleeing Afghanistan? What about NATO bombing Serbia? No amount of evidence can break a spell they've cast to protect themselves. Their arguments are not meant to persuade you. They are meant to reassure themselves. The fifth and final marker is a deep need for a pure, untouchable ideal, something sacred. It could be the motherland. It could be the Orthodox Church. It could be traditional values or the image of a great leader. What matters is that it's abstract, impossible to measure or question, and it must be protected at any cost. In this moral framework, the ends justify the means, even if those means include invasion, murder, or total societal collapse. These traits only work as a set. Every Vatnik clings to a sacred ideal. Everyone believes they are surrounded by hostile forces. Bitterness, the emotional intensity, and the dehumanization of opponents aren't optional. They are essential. Without them, the entire belief system begins to fall apart. If you know history, these patterns may look familiar. We've seen them before in the religious wars in Europe, in the Bolshevik experiments of Soviet Russia, in Mao's Cultural Revolution. The problem isn't the ideology itself. It is a universal psychological mechanism humans use to cope with overwhelming stress and uncertainty. But here's the part most people miss. This isn't just propaganda. It's biology. This is not new. It's at least 40,000 years old. I'm convinced we're dealing with a behavioral program, something ancient, inherited from our distant ancestors and originally designed for a completely different way of life. The Homo sapiens species is over 200,000 years old, and the version of us we recognize today, the fully modern human, emerged around 40,000 years ago. Let that sink in. Jesus lived just 2,000 years ago. We've had 40,000 years to build our instincts and only a few centuries to try and override them with reason. Our instincts were shaped for survival in an environment nothing like today's. Yet those instincts haven't gone anywhere. We still act on them, following what we call the voice of the heart, without realizing we are running on ancient code. To understand why people behave irrationally, we have to understand what our original normal was. For most of human history, we lived in small groups of 30 to 50 people. They lived during the Ice Age. Few forests, endless grasslands crawling with mammoths, wild horses, bison, and saber-toothed cats. These were open environments, not unlike today's African plains. To survive, you needed a tightly bonded group. If the group rejected you or you got separated, you didn't just feel sad. You were leopard food by nightfall. The behavior we see in Vatniks is the result of that same ancient fear, the fear of being exiled from the tribe. Of course, tribes today are symbolic. We call them nations, religions, or ideologies, but they still serve the same emotional purpose: to give us a sense of belonging and to keep us alive, at least in our subconscious. This fear of losing your tribe overrides moral judgment. Loyalty becomes salvation. When Russia invaded Ukraine, millions were forced to confront a painful question. Where do I belong now? I felt it too. I'm a Russian rider. That identity is part of me, but I could no longer call Putin's Russia my country. Realizing that felt like breaking a sacred ancestral taboo. It was as if I were a woman from the Ice Age returning to my tribe's fire, only to discover they had murdered and eaten one of their own. I was paralyzed by horror. I knew I couldn't stay with cannibals, but where could I go? That's the moment that breaks people. Not facts, not shame. That moment of exile. I had options, but my subconscious didn't care. For men especially, the idea of being cast out, of being irrelevant, unheard, unseen, can feel worse than death itself. I was lucky. I had my readers, my students, my writing. Eventually I found a new tribe, people who share my values. I didn't care about their passports or their ancestry. What matters was their sense of decency, their moral compass. But not everyone has that way out. Some people find new communities, others don't. Especially if they are already carrying a lifetime of quiet disappointments, dreams that didn't work out, skills no one values anymore. Let's look at Andrei, a 40-year-old Russian programmer living in the US. His English is weak. He's socially withdrawn, and he has no real friends. He goes to work, does his job, and goes home, but he does not feel like he belongs. He can't just stop being Russian. To him, that would erase his entire identity, what psychologists call symbolic death. He's not angry because he is brainwashed. He's angry because he feels like no one needs him anymore. So his brain offers him a solution. A fantasy Russia. Glorious, strong, eternal. He clings to it. He denies war crimes. He claims Ukrainians are bombing themselves. He sees evil everywhere else and dehumanizes anyone who questions him, because questioning his fantasy tribe feels like an attack on his very existence. Or take Sveta, a postal worker in St. Petersburg. She's married with 2 kids. She's buried in debt and in pain, with no one to help. Can Sveta be anything but a Vatnik? Theoretically, yes. But in practice, if she has no alternative tribe to join, her loyalty to the only group she knows becomes her survival strategy. And Dmitry, an actor in TV dramas, if he is suspected of disloyalty, he won't get work. He can't afford another rejection, another closed door. If we look at these people abstractly, we wonder, how can anyone support a war? How can you justify killing your neighbors? But when we zoom in on Andrei, Sveta, or Dmitry, we start to see their emotional logic. They feel ignored, undervalued, and uncertain about their future. Their place in society feels shaky, and so symbolic belonging becomes everything. From the outside, their loyalty looks grotesque. From the inside, it feels like oxygen. That's when the final psychological switch flips. To secure their place in the tribe, people turn to a primal ritual, grooming the alpha male. In modern form, that looks like posting fan art on Putin, sharing loyalty oaths on social media, and attacking strangers in comment sections. It gives relief. The program has run. The ritual is complete. And for today, at least, the leopards will eat someone else. Now here's the hardest part to admit. The line between them and us is thinner than we want to believe. Can we say that being a Vatnik is a uniquely Russian trait? Absolutely not. This mindset is a universal and natural human response to instability and fear of the future. It's a psychological survival instinct, not a cultural defect. It's what happens when people feel insecure, unprotected, and unseen. The Vatnik mechanism tends to activate in predictable social groups: the elderly, young men from broken homes, women who want marriage but can't find a partner, anyone who lives with the feeling I'm not valued or my place in this society is at risk. They don't become Vatniks because they are stupid. They become Vatniks because they are human. None of us are immune. If you are not a Vatnik, it's not because you are smarter or better. It just means you already belong to some other tribe. And for now, your place in it feels secure. But if that were to change, if you suddenly felt isolated, unvalued, and uncertain, your ancient survival programming would kick in too. You'd start looking for an alpha, a tribe, a belief, and a ritual. That's how it works. I remember clearly. I was a Vatnik once. In the early 1990s, I was a struggling young lawyer making around $100 a month. I was breaking up with my boyfriend. My friends told me I'd never be a writer, that literature was pointless nonsense. I was lost. So I coped the way millions of others did. I wrote long essays about Russia as a mystical, sacred land, a country too profound for the wicked, shallow West to ever understand. I believed in the cosmic battle between good and evil and Russia's divine mission in that fight. Spoiler alert, I did become a writer. And anyone who's ever doubted that is welcome to explore my books. Stories that are not only rich and insightful, but beautiful in both form and meaning. You'll find the links in the video description below. Arguing with Vatniks only confirms that they already believe that the world is hostile and dangerous, and that they must cling either tighter to their precious leader. It's a trap. Don't fall into it. Instead, I use a strategy that I've tested many times, and it works. First, don't try to change their mind. Really listen to what they say and ask respectful questions, not to win, but to invite reflection. If you ask, why did the war in Ukraine start? They'll repeat stock answers, not their own thoughts, but the ones they've heard from TV or Telegram. But if you ask, what do you think would happen if Russia hadn't invaded Ukraine? You open a different kind of door. That's a personal question. They have to think for themselves. And when the conclusion comes from within, it matters far more than anything you could have told them. Second, always reinforce their dignity. You are entitled to your opinion. I respect it. Your views come from your own life experience. You are showing that you are not a threat, You are not challenging their place in society. Instead, you are gently offering something else, a hint that maybe you could be part of the same new tribe. Third, find common ground. I recently reconnected with an old friend who turned out to be a Vatnik. We agreed up front. We probably wouldn't agree on anything. And that was fine. We still had a great conversation. Eventually, we talked about the demographic collapse in Europe and the US. We both agreed it's a serious problem and something needs to be done. By the way, I have a whole video on that. Check it out. Look, our goal isn't to defeat each other. We are not trying to force everyone into one way of thinking. Our goal is peaceful coexistence. If we are not killing each other, that's already a good start. The Vatnik isn't a monster. The Vatnik is a mirror, a reminder of how fragile human identity is, how easy we trade reason for reassurance when the world feels uncertain. And that instinct, the tribal survival reflex, is not Russian, it's human. It lives in you, in me, in every society that flirts with authoritarianism when the future feels too unstable. If we want to resist dictatorship, not just in Russia, but anywhere, we must resist the conditions that create Vatniks: alienation, shame, hopelessness. We must build communities that make it safe to change your mind, because in the end, no propaganda is more powerful than the feeling, I matter here. That's the feeling every man deserves. And the feeling many dictators promise, until you realize the only way to keep it is to stop thinking. If this video gave you something to think about, please consider subscribing. It truly helps the channel grow. If you'd like to support my work directly, you can click the join button, give a super thanks, or buy me a coffee using the link below. Every bit of support keeps this work going. And if you are curious about the deeper emotional and historical truths behind what you saw today, I invite you to check out my books, linked below. That's where the journey really begins. Thank you for watching.